Yudalin base 14b. Most of the way down, we're at Tanoihi. Tanoihi is a little more than half the way down. First word of the line is Lema. Lema. Lema Hilach.
Is that the Ashkenazi way of saying Lima?
Lema Hilach Kischi Tanoihi. Let's say that the question of Hilach is Kischi, meaning if you tell somebody to carry a document, are you telling them to acquire the document on behalf of the intended beneficiary? Let's say this is a Machlekes Tanam. This is quite a list here. Try to remember everything. Okay, Tanya we learned Hilach Manul Pliny. He says to somebody, go carry this money to somebody else. Okay, so Reuven tells Shimon, take this money and give it to Levi. Okay, and what happened? V'holach he went. Ubikshu he looks for Levi. V'lemotzu he could not find Levi because Levi died.
Oh, his money.
Yachsaru. The first opinion is Yachsaru l'mishalach. Give it back to Reuven. Mason shalach. Let's say Reuven died. Also, so Levi died, and then Reuven died as well. Rav Nosson for Rabbi Yaakov Yachsaru l'yarshim mishalach. Rav Nosson and Rabbi Yaakov say you give it to Reuven's kids. Yes, I remember, and some say an anonymous additional opinion. You actually give it to Levi's kids. Rabbi Yehudah and also Omer Mishum Rabbi Yaakov Sh'amar Mishum Rabbi Mitzvah L'kayim Divrei Hames. There's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of the dead person. In other words, because Reuven said to give it to Levi, and Reuven's dead, so we give it to Levi or Levi's kids. Remember, the rabbis say we don't know what to do, and therefore yachleiku, we should split it between Reuven's kids and Levi's kids. However, v'kan amru kol ma sheyirtze shliach yasa. So in general, when you have a doubt of what to do, there are always two options. One is you could split the money, and the other one is called shuda d'daini. The shuda d'daini is another option. It's typically least preferred, but sometimes it's more helpful. Shuda d'daini is quite common in court today, where sort of the judge hears different opinions and he decides what he thinks makes the most sense. So in this case, the shliach, the messenger, he decides if he thinks that Reuven meant to give it to Levi's kids or just to Levi. So therefore, even though typically they would say Echleko would split, over here they say Shuda is better. You give it, whoever the messenger wants, he gives it to them. Shuda d'daini. Shuda d'daini literally means an evaluation of the judges. The judges evaluate, sort of a complex claim and decide what they think he actually meant at the time, even though the guy is not present to be able to say that. Okay. 1 second. Okay, Amr Shimon Hanasi says, I had such a story. But Amr, when they said, give it back to Reuven's kids. Okay. It must be this is a debate. The Tanakama, the first opinion that says it goes back to the guy who sent it to Reuven. They say that carrying the document on behalf of somebody is not an imperative to acquire it on behalf of the beneficiary. Rav Nosson for Yaakov Nami, Rav Nosson and Rav Yaakov say that if Reuven dies, it goes to Reuven's kids. Right? Reuven again is the one who's sending the money. It goes back to Reuven's kids. They also subscribe to the same opinion that he doesn't want him to acquire it on behalf of the beneficiary. And therefore it goes back to the one who sent it. Even though Reuven now died, we don't say because he died, there's a mitzvah to fulfill what he said, and therefore to give it to Levi's kids. Rather, we say he never acquired it for Levi, and therefore goes back to Reuven's kids. Some say, Some say, when he tells him to carry it, kischi, it's like telling him to acquire it. And that's why, according to the Yesh Amram, that's the additional anonymous opinion. The Yesh Amram says it goes to the kids of Levi. It goes to Levi's kids. That's because they say that he acquired it on Levi's behalf, on behalf of Levi. And if it belongs to Levi, then it goes to Levi's kids. Rabbi Yehudah Hanasi Amar, Mishum Rav Yaakov, Sham Mishum Meir. Rabbi Yehudah Hanasi says, "Halech lav kischi," that telling somebody to carry it is not like telling him to acquire it. Okay, so therefore, it really should go back to Reuben or Reuben's kids. However, miu hecha demeis, in a scenario where Reuben died, Amrina mitzvah kayim divrames. We say that Reuben's final testament is that this should be given to Levi, and therefore we fulfill his final testament by giving it to Levi or Levi's kids, even though it doesn't actually belong to Levi. And had Reuben been alive, he would have returned it to Reuben. In other words, Reuben sent the package to Levi. Right. Levi's dead. So the shliach comes back to Reuben. Reuben's dead too. Now that Reuben's dead, we say mitzvah kaim divrames, and go ahead and give it to Levi's kids. Had Reuben been alive, he would just give it back to Reuben and ask him what to do next. The rabbis say split the money. They don't know what to do. They don't know if halach is kischi or not, because they're not sure. They said you should split the money. However, they said even better, the kanam rishuda adaf. They said go ahead and try to make an evaluation to figure out whether he intended to give it to Levi or even to Levi's kids. Reb Shimon Hanasi, Ma'isa Asalash Mina. Reb Shimon Hanasi is coming to tell you a story that happened to him, and the story, and what did they do? What did they do? They gave it back to Reuven's kids, the sender's children.
Reuven was the original sender?
Correct. Okay. So obviously, what's the Gemara going to say? Loy. Of course, it's not dependent on halach kischi. Okay, so the verse is as follows. Nobody would debate this question if Reuven was healthy when Reuven sent out the message. Everyone agrees it goes back to Reuven. What's our scenario talking about? The guy is deathly ill. We plugged to Rabbi Lozer of Rabbanon, and it's the same debate as the question between Rabbi Lozer and the Rabbanon. What's the debate? The Tanan we learned. So you have a guy who's dividing up his assets on a deathbed. Obviously, he didn't write a will, or even if he did write a will, I guess he wants to redo it at some level. So what happens? Rabbi Lozer says, Echad bori ve'echad mesukan. Both a person who's healthy and a person who's mesukan, he's a shriven ra, he's deathly ill. Nechasim sheyesh lahem achrayas niktem bekesef b'shtara b'chazaka. She'en lahem achrayas ein niktem elav b'shicha. Okay, in other words, if you have real estate, you have to transact the real estate bekesef b'shtara b'chazaka. Kesef is a monetary acquisition. In other words, you have a guy who's deathly ill. He wants to give his friend a piece of real estate. How does his friend acquire it? Either by paying for it, or if they write a document, or through chazaka, which means he lives on. He does an action that shows that he wants to live on the land. The chazaka typically is what we call dayash mitzri, which means he walks along the borders of the property to investigate the property with the intention of acquiring it. Let's say he's giving movable items. So then the acquisition happens through him picking it up, moving it. Now the word here is used achrayas. If you remember, we discussed this on Shabbos. Achrayas means responsibility. And the question here is, can you have a lien on it? That's the real question. A item of value that a lien of a loan can be placed on is called responsible assets. And right in English, what they call these things, they call them secured. Is it they talk about the debt? They say, is it secure debt or is it unsecured debt? Unsecured debt, you can't collect anything from the guy. All you could do is add your name to the title, so that eventually, when he sells the house, you get a piece of it.
And what's the definition of unsecured?
That's
debt?
unsecured debt. Unsecured debt you cannot
What falls in
collect.
the category of unsecured
Credit
debt?
card debt.
I see.
If you borrow or any loan that isn't secured, you don't put up specifically exactly. If you don't specifically put up collateral, then they cannot collect more than they cannot collect a primary dwelling place or a primary car, or they can't collect the first large amount of money in your bank account. I don't know if it's $10,000 or $100,000. It's a lot of money. You can keep in your bank account. They cannot collect it. It's only when you have an RV and you have a boat and you have 3 houses that those they can collect. Okay, so that now, it obviously in the Talmudical system, this is before the days of credit cards. So there, debt that was you had every loan that was written in the document was secure debt, and the security was only real estate. There was no collateralized loans on cars. Well, that's obviously because there were no cars. It could be that had there been cars, they would have because the car is much easier to collateralize, much harder to hide and to move around. It's not like hiding a chair. It's much easier to hide a chair than to hide a car. Anyway, so that's the word achrayas. But okay, the point is that was just a side point. Why the word achrayas is used? Achrayas means basically, can a lien be put on it? If it has achrayas responsibility, you could put a lien on it. If it doesn't have responsibility, you can't put a lien on it. And that tends to be movable items. Okay, what's the message of Rabbi Elazar here? The message of Rabbi Elazar clearly is that a shchiv meira, a deathly ill person, does not have any benefit to transfer his assets. In other words, until now, he said that somebody who's a shchiv meira is able to, if he says something, we treat it as if it happened. If he says, give $100 to my friend, even if he dies the next moment before his friend had a chance to acquire it, it's as if it is as if his friend has acquired it. However, according to Rabbi Elazar, he actually has to acquire it. There's no benefit to a shchiv meira. The rabbis say, elu ve'elu nikdim ba'amira. According to the Chachamim, there is no kinyan necessary. If somebody's deathly ill, if he says something, we treat it as if it happens. Amrullah, he said to him, the rabbi said to Rabbi Elazar, the mother of the kids of the Reichel. Reichel literally means a peddler. She was ill. But Amr, and she said, give how they translate kivinosin, brooch. Apparently it was a very expensive one. It was worth 12 mana. What is 12 mana? Mana is roughly the amount of money a person lives on for a year at a minimum. You're talking about $150,000 or $200,000. Very expensive brooch. What happened? Yomei says she died. And the rabbis listened to her, and they gave this brooch to her daughter. So Amar Lahem, Rabbi Elazar responded, "Bnei Reichel, the kids of this Reichel, tikvarim imam. They should bury their mother." In other words, they did the wrong thing, and that was a pretty harsh way to say it. Okay, so we have this debate between the rabbis and Rabbi Elazar. So the Gemara tries to go through each one of the opinions. Remember, the original question was Reuven sends a gift to Shimon, right? Reuven sends a gift to Shimon. I'm sorry. Reuven gives Shimon a gift to give to Levi, right? And then Levi dies. the rabbis say, Tanakama says that it goes back to Reuven. Tanakama goes like Rabbi Lozer. Why? Because Rabbi Lozer says you need an active acquisition. And in this scenario, because the money was not yet given over, there was no acquisition act yet. There was no kinyan. Rabbi Nosson and Rabbi Yaakov Namik Rabbi Lozer. Rabbi Nosson and Rabbi Yaakov also agree with Rabbi Lozer. Afagav the mace, even though Reuven dies, right? We don't listen to what Reuven says. We give it back to the inheritors of Reuven because there was no transaction. Yes, I remember the opinion of somebody is Kirabonon. They go with the rabbi's opinion and therefore goes to Levi's kids because they say that because Reuven was on his deathbed and said, give this gift to Levi, it's as if Levi had it already, and therefore Levi's kids get it. Rabbi Yehudah Hanasi Shamar Shumar Meir Karbelozer. Rabbi Yehudah Hanasi actually agrees with Rabbi Lozer that we do not give it to. He holds like Rabbi Lozer that because it was not transacted yet, it really should go back to Reuven. The mace when Reuven is dead, Amrina Mitzvah Kaim Divrei Mace. We say we're going to fulfill what Reuven wanted. I remember the rabbis say, that you should split it. They don't know what to do. But over here they say, Shuda Adif. It's better for the messenger to try to figure out, in his own opinion, what did Reuven really want to do? Did he want to give it to the inheritors of Levi or not? For Reb Shimon Hanasi, and Reb Shimon Hanasi is coming to tell you a story. Okay. And according to his story, according to Shimon's story, there was the 1 second, and they gave it back to Reuven's children.
We discussing money that was as a gift.
As a gift, so it's
So
definitely
owed money. It wasn't money that
doesn't appear to be. Yeah, typically the Gemara, Hailach money is a gift. So the Gemara says, question: Reb Shimon Hanasi, Nasi who is Reb Shimon Hanasi? Was he actually the prince? Because there was a Nasi named Reb Shimon. Or was he quoting it in the name of the name of a Nasi, the name of a prince? So the Gemara says, Tashma and Amr of Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says, Halacha Reb Shimon Hanasi. The halacha follows his opinion, i.e., it goes back to Reuven's kids. So the Gemara says that doesn't really answer anything. Okay, so the halacha follows the Nasi, but the question is still open. Nasi who? Was he a prince or was he saying it in the name of a prince? The Gemara resolves, take it, let it stand. It's unresolved. Amr of Yosef. Halacha Reb Shimon Gufa. What's the original Gemara? Amr of Yosef. Halacha Reb Shimon Nasi. The halacha follows the opinion of Reb Shimon Nasi. So the Gemara asks, we know that we treat the word of a shchivim ra as if it happened already. Now, how could you say the halacha follows Reb Shimon? According to the Gemara's resolution, Reb Shimon actually goes to Rabbi Lozer that says the words of a shchivim ra of a deathly ill person still require a kinyan. So the Gemara says, if Yosef Muki Labibari, Rav Yosef says that this Bryce is talking about a bari, a healthy person. So the Gemara says, okay, so the Gemara says, V'hali Yarshim Mishalech Kamar. Reb Shimon says, give it back to the inheritors of the one who sent the gift. Okay, so in other words, Reuven was actually healthy when he sent the gift. And that's why it goes back to Reuven. That I understand. But hold on a second. Reuven dies. Now, the halacha is in general throughout Talmud, there's a mitzvah kaim divrei meis. If a person gives a command before he dies, something that's his and relevant to him and pertinent to him, then we do our best to listen to it. This isn't always true. Certain times people ask for things and they go against Jewish custom, and the answer is no. And if there's time later, I'll tell you an interesting story on that subject. But it's not always we'll listen to what a dead person says. We try our best to accommodate reasonable requests. Now over here, he intended on giving a gift. So why don't we accommodate his request and give the gift to the inheritors of the guy who we wanted to give the gift to, Levi's kids? So the Gemara says, Tani Yachsurim, the Gemara says, Tani Yachsurim Mishalech. You're right. In Reb Shimon's story, actually, it went back to Reuven. It didn't go back to Reuven's kids, because if Reuven died, the halacha would be that we would give it to the kids of Levi, because we want to fulfill we want to accommodate the last will and testament of the dead person. And that concludes the first parak. Okay.
The sender,
What, at the end it says return to the sender.
Goes back to Reuven. So if Reuven had died, the halacha would be give it to Reuven's kids. And again, Reuven here is a healthy person. Don't make it.
Levi and Levi's kids don't do it.
So again, Reuven was healthy.
Right.
Reuven was not deathly ill. He was a healthy person. And there was a tragedy, got into a car accident, and as he was dying, he told somebody to give I'm sorry. Period. No, then he was a car accident and he died.
Mhm.
And now if that happened, the messenger would give it actually to Levi's kids. Why to Levi's kids? Because that's the final will and testament of Reuven. Sadly, he didn't leave a final will and testament because he died in a car accident. But that's what you would do. However, we're talking about a scenario where Reuven didn't actually die. And if Reuven didn't die, then the halacha follows Reb Shimon. That, in other words, we're changing Reb Shimon. Until now, we read Reb Shimon as a scenario where Reuven died. And now we're reading Reb Shimon as a scenario where instead of Reuven dying, Reuven's still alive, and it goes back to Reuven.
All right.
Okay. Now, the
the
first,
so the messenger is responsible for that money if something of his loss or stolen, right?
typically speaking,
Because it's voluntary.
it's a whole separate story.
Seems like
I guess we'll say, wait for that in a second. Then to deal
seems
with
like
that.
the rabbis in Babylonia had in this whole class.
In general, by the way, so even if you're a shomer, so typically if you're a shomer china, meaning you're not working for pay, you're not responsible if something is stolen or lost.
You have to take an oath, right?
Yes, but that's the problem. Today we don't take an oath.
Right.
Nobody will. No, there's two types of oaths: it's shua deraisa and shua derabanan. Shua deraisa, no court will allow you to take a shua deraisa. Period. We just don't do it. And shua derabanan, it is possible to take a shua derabanan, and it happens. A shua deraisa, no court will allow you to do, and therefore the rule is since you can't swear, you have to pay. Now, most courts will give you a compromise. They'll tell you maybe pay 40% or something like that. The typical, when I'm asked to carry, sometimes it happens. I was asked to carry a large amount of money. I will always say that
No.
you have to believe me without a shvua.
Yeah.
So if you believe me without a shvua, then effectively, if it's lost, if it's not stolen, if it's not lost due to my own, sufficient negligence, then you'll have to believe me, and I'm not making a shvua, and I'm not paying you either.
Got robbed or something happened.
Yeah, I once had it with a guy. I said, and he said, don't take it. I said, okay, and this was someone who knew exactly what he was doing. He well understood that I would have been responsible. I said to him, like, you're putting me in a position where it's so easily the item that you're asking me to take for you is going to break, and you know that. And like, how could you ask me to take responsibility? There's a good chance it's going to break. Like, why should I take responsibility for it? You're not paying me anything. And even if you were, like, it's not worth it.
So that last, it seems like the messenger, or was it the rabbi, Babylonian said that he decides where it goes, right?
What was that?
The messenger decided, the rabbis in Babylonia.
According to one opinion, yeah. Shuda.
Seems like if you're taking on all that responsibility.
So Shuda is interesting. Shuda is sort of a mechanism of actually giving a judgment. So in other words, we could say, we don't know what to do, so we'll give it 50-50. Shuda is, well, maybe there's a better alternative. Maybe actually we could try to figure out if Reuven wanted to give it to Levi's kids or not. Who's going to be the best one to figure that out? The messenger. So he's going to be the one to adjudicate that scenario. Okay. So now the first paragraph we spoke about is the obligation of b'fanei nechtam. Then we got a little bit sidetracked on some of the commonalities between a slave and a get, between a shechor and a get. Okay. Now we get back to now. Let's say somebody said b'fanei nechtam, but he made a mistake. So let's see. Hamevi get Medina Siyam. Somebody brings a divorce from outside of Israel. And he says b'fanei nechtam. I saw it being written. Avalei b'fanei nechtam. He did not see it being signed. Or he says, b'fanei nechtam, I saw it being signed, avalei b'fanei nechtam, but I didn't see it being written. B'fanei nechtam kulei, or b'fanei nechtam chatziev. Okay, in other words, I saw the document being written, but I didn't see it being signed. Or he says, b'fanei nechtam chatziev, b'fanei nechtam kulei. I saw half of it being written, and I saw both signatures being signed. In all these scenarios, puzzle. The document is not a kosher document. You have two people. One of them says, I saw it being written. The other one says, I saw it being signed. The document is invalid. Two people say they saw it being written, and one says he saw it being signed. Puzzle. It's also invalid. Rabbi Yehudah says in that scenario, two people said we saw it being written. One person says he saw it being signed. It's kosher. One person says he saw it being written. Two people verify the signatures. It's kosher. Okay, now just give a little bit of a brief outline here before we see the Gemara. If you remember, what's the reason for this decree? Why are we saying b'fanei nechtam? One of two reasons: either because of or because kiyum stars, to verify the documents.
Kiyum stars, that's right.
Okay, now if you remember, the Gemara says now everyone agrees that kiyum stars is necessary, and everyone agrees that b'fanei nechtam is not the regular method of kiyum stars. Regular method involves two witnesses testifying about both signatures. Okay, now because this is not the regular, 1 second. Give me a second here. Now, if you use b'fanei, because b'fanei nechtam is different than regular verification, you cannot mix and match. You can't do something that looks like a verification and then also try to rely on the reliability of b'fanei nechtam. That statement. Okay, so let's see the Gemara. Why is this mission necessary? We've already learned this. The first Mishnah in Mesechta Gittin. The first Mishnah says that you need to, when you bring a divorce, you need to say b'fanei nechtam. So Gemara says, if it would have just said the first Mishnah, have a minute tzarach. You need to the Eloi Amar, but if he didn't say it kosher, the document would be kosher. Mashma that no, not only is it not only that if you didn't say it, the document is not kosher. If he saw half the document being written and he saw both signatures, it's not kosher. Hey Chetziav, which half? If it's the first half of the document. But Amr Balazar, I feel like Kasav El Shid Achas Mashuv Ein Tzarech. 1 second. If it's, in other words, if it's the first line of the document, only one line needs to be Lishma. So as long as he saw the second half, which is basically the names and the dates and all the important features of the document, who cares if he didn't see the first part? So the Gemara says, "Amar Vashi Chetziv Achron." 1 second. Okay. In other words, okay, the first half of the divorce it's actually, Taisus explains, the first half of the divorce is the part that contains the names and the dates. So it's also an important part. And because he doesn't testify to the first 1 second. Because so if he testifies that he saw the first part being written lishma, then it works. He testifies he saw only the second part, then the document is not valid because the names are already written. Okay, so let's begin the next Gemara. In other words, you only have to see part of the document being written lishma. Which part? The part with the names in it. That's the first half. The second half does not need to be seen. However, if you only saw the second half but not the first half, then it's not valid. So the Gemara says, "B'fanei nechtav kula, b'fanei nechtav chatziyaf." Also, it's not kosher. Amar Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda says, Rav Chizda makes a statement. It's not related to the Mishnah. V'afilu shnayim me'idin achasim yad sheni posel. So if a guy says, "I saw the document being written and I saw one of the signatures being signed," and then two witnesses testify on the other signature, it's not verified. Why? My timer. Either you use b'fanei nechtav or you verify the document properly, and because this is neither, it doesn't work. Masif Rava. So Rava asks, is it possible to ilu amar chad kosher if one of the guys said it was kosher? In other words, if the guy said b'fanei nechtav, if I saw both signatures, the document would be kosher. Now that he says I only saw one signature, and on the other signature I have two witnesses, now it's going to be possible. Two people are going to make it worse off. Rava says, "Afilu u'be'echad me'idin al chasimas yad sheni posel." So he says, what happened? The guy testified on one signature, and on the other signature, him and somebody else testified. It's possible. My time out. Why is it possible? What does that mean? Okay, let's say you're verifying signatures. So you have a document, unknown authorship. Somebody comes to court. He says, two people come to court. One person says, "This is my signature, and I recognize it belongs to Reuven." And the other guy with him says, "I recognize this second signature and it belongs to Reuven." The halacha is that is not kosher. Why? Because you have to see each witness as sort of having the power over half the money. Over here, one witness is having power over 3/4 of the money because he's testifying about his own signature. That's half the money, and that he's relied on. And he's testifying about half of the remaining signature, which is another quarter. Half plus a quarter is 3/4. So therefore, same problem here. He's testifying on one signature plus half of the second signature. That doesn't work because it looks like it's a verification of the signatures, and this type of verification is not kosher because it's 3/4 of the money on one witness. Okay. So the Gemara says, Rav Ashi had the following question. Rav Ashi points out something that's very odd. Hold on a second. The guy says, "I verify everything," perfectly fine. The guy says, "I verify everything," and somebody says, "And I verify one signature." All of a sudden, it's problematic. It's exactly what happened. The guy says, "I verify one signature," and this is the other signature. And somebody else comes and says, with regard to the other signature, this is the other signature, belongs to Shimon. Why is if the second guy would have not showed up to Beis Din, everything would have been perfectly fine. Now the second guy showed up, all of a sudden it's a problem. It's a problem. What's the problem? Why should that be problematic? Rashi says, "Afilu omer anihu eid hasheni posel." Now 1 second. Okay, so if he says, "I saw one signature and I am the second witness," it doesn't work. Why? My time. Either verify the signatures the way it's supposed to be done, or rely on the tekanas l'chamim of b'fanei nechtav or b'fanei nechtam. Okay. Okay, we'll start the next Gemara. I don't know if we'll finish. We might have to leave it at the beginning and start again. Okay, tonight we learned to the Mishnah. B'fanei nechtav kulai, b'fanei nechtam chatziev. The guy testifies that he saw the document being written, but only one signature. Puzzle. It's not kosher. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. Ida chetzi of the other half. Hechidami. What about the other half? If you say there's nobody testifying on the other half of the signatures, the high kamasa the kulak siva, the high kamasa the kulak siva apostle, chetzimi boy. Okay, in other words, the Gemara asks as follows: if there are two people, one testifies on the writing, one testifies on the signatures, apostle does not work. So certainly, if you have one person testifies, but not on the complete document, only on the writing and half the signatures, sure it should be possible because he's not testifying on the full validity of the documents. Okay, so there's two possibilities. The truth is somebody is testifying on the other signature. And how is somebody testifying on the other signature? Either it is like Rava, it's a joint testimony. He's working with somebody else to verify the other signatures, or like Rav Ashi, where he says he is the other signator. Okay. However, ulafukim Rav Chizda, this does not work for Rav Chizda. What did Rav Chizda say? 1 second. Rav Chizda says two outside people are testifying on one of the signatures. So he's testifying on the writing in one signature, and two other people are testifying about one signature. And evidently in that scenario, the document would be kosher, not like Rav Chizda. Because the Mishnah obviously is coming to tell you one thing here. It's either Rava or it's Rav Ashi, because those are much smaller chidushim. In other words, the claim of Rava and Rav Ashi requires less substantiation, and that specifically is included. In other words, a scenario where he testifies on the signatures, one signature and the document, and the other signature, either he says I am the signator, or he says that him and somebody else testify that it's Shimon's signature. In either scenario is much more close to testifying on the full document than Rav Chizda. I'm sorry. Either one of these scenarios is more problematic than Rav Chizda, which has two full witnesses that are not him. So therefore, the Mishnah seems to imply that Rav Chizda would actually work. Rav Chizda says, okay. In some, we'll continue. We'll stop another 2 minutes. But in short, the Gemara's response is, Rav Chizda's response is very simple here. It's basically, you're right, but the Mishnah says many things that are extra also. So this is one of the extra things. So it doesn't mean that my scenario is kosher. My scenario is also not kosher. But it's not, the Mishnah is talking about many different things that are not necessary. And the Mishnah mentioned one of them and didn't mention my example. Okay, so he says ultamech, and according to your argument, you'll have to agree with me there are things that are extra in the Mishnah. In other words, if one guy says b'fanei nechtav, one guy says b'fanei nechtam, two different people. What happens? It's invalid. So certainly, if one guy says b'fanei nechtav and nobody testifies on the signatures, of course it's invalid. And the same thing in reverse. Somebody testifies on the signatures and somebody does not testify on the writing, same thing. So hold on a second. Now, both those scenarios are extra. Okay, so the Mishnah anyways has extra scenarios. Okay, so maybe the Mishnah forgot mine and put in a different extra scenario. Ella must be loizu avzukatani. Hachanami loizu avzukatani. So it must be the Mishnah had extra scenarios. So okay, this is also an example of an extra scenario. And there's no proof to the question of whether or not if you have one witness say you have the guy says b'fanei nechtav and b'fanei nechtam one signature, and then two witnesses testify on the other signature. Of course, would say that's invalid. Rav and Rav Ashi say that is valid. There's no proof of our Mishnah. Tomorrow we go completely sideways and we get totally sidetracked from the beginning, discussing all sorts of random things. Rav Chizda basically was what they called splitting the
Splitting hairs?
Split something that's not splittable. I don't know.
Splitting hairs.
Yeah.
Splitting hair.
Split the baby. Splitting the baby. Splitting the baby. That's what they call it. Splitting the baby.
Splitting the baby.
Because we'll be splitting the baby tomorrow. Couple